Welcome to my channel. I am Daisy, your hostess, and in this video we will continue exploring the writings of Charles Brodie Patterson in his book titled Dominion and Power, or The Science of Life and Living. If you're new, welcome, and to our subscribing community, welcome back. Hopefully you're enjoying this. In the previous video we read through chapters 2 and 3, both titled Good and Evil, and respectively the other one was called Character Building, which coincidentally I do have a book by H. Addington Bruce titled Stiffening Your Mental Backbone, which is all about character building. Anyway, this thing on good and evil, I really enjoyed how the author said, let us hold clearly in mind this thought, the idea that everything is good. And in that sense, it giving us an opportunity to consider that the universe is perfect, and the way that it is has many parts, and each part is made to do the part of another when that is their duty, that there is a violation of the law, and they're in that aspect creating friction and creating discord. And this is where the term evil would come in. And even though it might sound utopian, and it's not far off to believe that when we are experiencing or participating in things that bring harmony and peace of mind, that we are fulfilling a universal law. In the context of good and evil, the author went on to kind of different in a category, mentioning good and bad, and that there are no mistakes in God's plan, and that God did not make some people good and others evil or others bad. I give pause at this moment to contemplate about a world without evil, or a world where there isn't bad. And of course, everything is relative. You would need something to compare it to something else, right? So like I mentioned, I want to bring in the future a video talking about the different universal laws. So the law of relativity would be one of those. In a sense then, in a world where there's devoid of evil and devoid of bad, we wouldn't know. And does it mean that for us humans living on this earth plane, if we come to this plane, as many say, that we come here to grow and to learn, do we need these experiences or this opportunity through the will to choose to be disobedient to the law, to understand it at a different core when we are being good, and to understand what that harmony and that peace of mind looks like through that opportunity? I don't know. What do you think? But yet this author in this particular chapter allows us to kind of sit with that and think about that and what that really means. So I hope you come back to this chapter if you haven't. Now, in the chapter titled Character Building, the author dives into some concepts of faith, hope, love, temptation, and mistakes. And all of these, he uses it to evolve his dissertation on how these different areas actually allow us opportunity to develop our character. So I'm not going to go too much into that, and I will go ahead now and flip the page to the next chapter. So please do leave me your comment. Tell me what your thoughts were on that chapter if you had a chance to visit that. Sit back and enjoy. Chapter 4, Breath Control. A quote by E. Hatch. Breathe on me, breath of God, fill me with life anew, that I may love what thou dost love, and do what thou wouldst do. Breathe on me, breath of God, until my heart is pure, until with thee I will one will, to do or to endure. Breathe on me, breath of God, till I am wholly thine, till all this earthly part of me glows with thy fire divine. Breathe on me, breath of God, so I shall never die, but live with thee the perfect life of thine eternity. End quote. A quote by Samuel Longfellow. The freer step, the fuller breath, the wide horizon's grander view, the sense of life that knows no death, the life that maketh all things new. End quote. A quote by Sacred Books of the East. He who gives breath, he who gives strength, whose command all the bright gods revere, whose shadow is immortality. End quote. It is not possible at the present time to form any adequate estimate of the true value of rightly controlled breath. All theories believed in and held to in the past fall so far short of what is really true concerning the wonderful benefits to be gained both in mind and body through an understanding and use of the function of breathing. When one considers the fact that the majority of people use only from 1/4 to 1/3 of their lung capacity, the question of breathing assumes an importance which heretofore it has not received. It is a well-known fact that nature never creates anything without a purpose, and that if an organ is not used, it becomes weakened, and it is only a step further to disease. Thus, it is no wonder that so many people suffer from diseases of the lungs or from other diseases caused through failure to breathe properly. There is no question, however, but that the minds of thoughtful people are becoming more interested and desirous of knowledge upon the subject to enable them to use this function in a true and natural way. And there is no doubt but that the good derived through the true use of the breath will prove of incalculable benefit. May it not prove the starting point of a new round of evolution, which will tend to make man in every sense greater than he has been in the past and with more wonderful capacities? Many scientists believe that the evolution of man has reached its highest limit, and that any decided change would tend rather to develop him abnormally. For instance, if man gained in his brain power, it would be at the expense of his body. This need not be true. When the lungs are used to their full capacity, the physical man will keep pace with the intellectual. The one thing upon which stress is laid by medical and scientific men is that oxygen is the all-important element in the atmosphere to be inbreathed. That is the element which keeps the blood pure and from which life is derived. But oxygen is not life, no matter what our scientific friends may think about it. It is only one of many properties proceeding from the great life. Everything necessary to sustain the physical man is to be found in the atmosphere he breathes. It does not consist alone of the organic elements, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and carbonic acid gas, but of countless infinitesimal life germs, and it may be that the body, from first to last, is composed of these life germs which we have breathed in from the atmosphere about us, and that every cell in the body is a living organism, endowed with a life and intelligence of its own. Furthermore, the time is not far distant when consciously we shall take from the atmosphere, through the right use of the breath, nearly, if not all, the nourishment necessary to complete and sustain the body, no matter whether that nourishment is contained in the atmospheric elements or whether it is breathed in from the myriad life germs in the atmosphere, or both. It is generally conceded by the scientific world now that some kinds of bacteria add to the nourishing properties of food, for example, those which infest milk. It is also a well-known fact that these same germs improve the quality of butter. That bacteria are necessary to the upbuilding and sustaining of vegetable and animal life seems to be shown by the fact that when milk is exposed in high altitudes beyond the range of animal and vegetable life, the bacteria no longer enter into it. This would tend to show the wonderful economy of nature, for only where there is organic life is there the wherewithal to sustain it. Some may ask, why is it, if nourishment can be inbreathed, that people have to eat so much food? When we take into consideration the fact that people ordinarily are using only 1/3 of their lung capacity, is it to be wondered at that they eat a large amount of food? Suppose the lungs were developed to their full capacity. Might not the result be far different? In the many cases which have come under my observation of people who have made a study of the use and control of breath, I have noted that, without exception, they all eat less, many reducing their food by 1/2, and a few even going beyond that, in every case with beneficial results. It was not that they themselves had any desire to lessen the quantity of food eaten, but it was rather the result of growth, a natural change. Again, it may be said that the lower animals eat and that it is natural for them to do so. Very true, and it may be perfectly natural for man to replenish his body in the same way, and yet there may come a time when all the food necessary can be taken by breathing it directly from the atmosphere. It may be asked of what use will be the digestive organs if man is to obtain his food by breathing. I would suggest that while those organs have been necessary in the past and may still be for a time in the future, man in a higher stage of development will use them in a different way. Evolution has shown us that as organs of the body become unnecessary, they are reduced in size, either disappearing altogether or assuming some new function. Plants and many kinds of fish breathe in nourishment. It might argue a retrograde movement on the part of man if only the lower forms of life take their sustenance from the atmosphere. But this would really be no argument, for the fish and the plant in their limited capacity are perfect. Man has not yet attained to his perfection, but when he does attain it, he may develop the power to nourish and sustain his physical form by the indrawing of life from the atmosphere. I am quite thoroughly convinced that controlled breath action exerts a power on man's physical life that is of very great importance, one on which the majority of people fail to place an adequate estimate. Breath acts as a counterbalance to the fire in the human body. When we consider that the body is composed of all the elements of the earth, it should be plain to anyone that these elements should be properly adjusted or in right relation one to another. Fire, when dominant, destroys physical equilibrium. If the breath is short and weak, there is a tendency for the fire to consume and destroy the body. The function of breathing characterizes the whole body from head to foot. When one is breathing in a true natural way, not only are the pores of the body open and the breath is inhaled and exhaled through them, but the breath penetrates or circulates among all the molecules of the body. The whole organism may be said to breathe. If we draw with the in-breath, as many scientists claim that we do, life-giving properties from the vegetation about us and the vegetation in turn is benefited by outgoing breath. It shows the interrelation between man and the lower forms of life, and that all life is one, and that the true relation consists in a mutual giving and receiving, which holds good even from the least to the greatest of things. It is true that if we all lived natural lives, it would not be necessary to learn breath control. But because there's so much that is superficial in our everyday way of living, we need to establish all over, as it were, a right habit of breathing. But when this right habit is once established, it becomes automatic in its action and no longer requires the same attention that was necessary in the forming of the habit. Physical poise is necessary for perfect breathing. The body can only be kept poised as it is held in control by the mind. As one's thought is centered, the body becomes erect. When the thought habit is established, it, in turn, establishes the physical habit. Physical exercise of all kinds, such as walking, running, riding, etc., are all good. But we must never lose sight of the fact that it is the mental exhilaration that gives us the true effect, that the mere physical act itself is not enough, and it is the enjoyment which we get from it that tends to renew and strengthen. When anything done in the physical realm becomes monotonous, so that we lose interest, it will bring little benefit to the body. We should learn to be thoroughly interested in everything we do, and then both work and play will prove beneficial. There are always two actions, the action from the center out and a return or reflex action, proving the law that whatever we give out will return to us. Remember, the reflex action must ever be the result of the true interaction, so that we have mind and body acting and reacting in perfect harmony. The controlled effort to breathe should be directed from the diaphragm with the abdomen drawn in and the body held erect. The drawing in of the abdomen has a tendency to throw the shoulders and chest slightly forward. This is the true natural position of the body. And if one keeps it either sitting or standing, his breathing is going to be far more natural than it could be in any other position. In all breathing exercises, in order to derive the greatest amount of benefit, one should enter into them as he would enter into any recreation, with a pleasurable feeling and the mind thoroughly centered on what he is doing. If one allows this course, it will aid him in the concentration of thought and in many other ways help to evolve latent powers. It is the outgoing breath that requires the most attention. On its perfect control depends to a very great degree the incoming breath. The outbreathing corresponds to and is affected by desire. The inbreathing is the response, the inspiration, or fulfillment of desire. People do not breathe as well in the dark as in the light. Hence, when the mind is darkened by wrong thoughts, there is a lack of controlled regular breathing. Impure thoughts produce that fetid breath. Pure, uplifting thoughts, the sweet breath. Some may say that it is not thought that affects the breath, but a disordered stomach. But all the false emotions of life act on that organ, and an impure breath is the result. It is more certain that malaria proceeds from this atmosphere of anxious or evil thought, expressed through impure breath, than from anything that is injurious in the earth's atmosphere. Our minds, through thought and breath, affect the physical atmosphere about us. To how great a degree it is not possible to say, but as to its effect, there can be no question. We all know the discordant and inharmonious feelings we have when in any assemblage where there is conflict of thought and ideas. On the other hand, we have all experienced the peace and harmony that prevail in an assemblage where there is unity rather than conflict of thought, one in which all are of one mind and one purpose. In trying to acquire the use of the breath, one should have high and exalted thoughts in the mind. If we would have noble aspirations with the incoming breath, we must then give out beautiful thoughts with the outgoing breath, because in the giving we receive, and the giving is always with the outgoing breath, and the receiving with the incoming. Breathe out thoughts of kindness, courage, hope, joy, and gladness. Then the breath will be pure and sweet. It cannot be otherwise. We do not yet know how much the breath has to do with atmospheric conditions, but it may yet be known that the very atmosphere about us is purified and electrified by the controlled breath, which carries with it high and helpful thoughts. It is not the long, deep breath that makes one think in a strong, true way, but rather the strong, buoyant, hopeful thinking that causes the strong, deep breathing. It must be evident to all who have given any thought to the matter that the different emotions have a direct action upon one's breathing. That false emotions such as hate, anger, or jealousy cause a short, quick action of the breath, while the inner feelings of peace, joy, or love give the properly controlled deep breathing. Breath action is even affected by purely external things. In the gazing at different colors, for instance, the breath is visibly affected. White, yellow, or blue tend in their order toward freedom in breathing. Black produces a restraining influence on the breath, while red quickens yet shortens the breath. The wearing of black clothes and the crepe veil that people resort to when their friends have passed on to another life has beyond all question an injurious effect. Retarding the breath in its true action, it also acts upon the mind to keep alive morbid or gloomy thoughts, keeping one in a state that is both mentally and physically unhealthy. When high and noble thought enters into the life of a man and finds an abiding place there, he becomes self-centered. Perhaps a word of explanation is necessary on self-centering. I mean by it that when a man realizes his true relationship to God and his fellow man and seeks to control his life from his highest conscious thought, he becomes self-centered, or in other words, he has found his true center. An instance was given me of the effect of centered or diaphragmatic breathing upon the mind in the case of some college students who declared that it made them feel more manly and inspired them with a desire for higher things. This physical center is the great center of feeling. The brain is the great thought center. As thought is the product of feeling, then the solar plexus must be the vital center of being. And someday the scientific world will recognize this fact. From this center is generated the magnetic currents of life. Thought generates the electric force. The blending of the two forces converts them into one, bringing about the perfect poise of mind and body. Perhaps no race of people has paid so much attention to breath action as the Hindu. In talking with one of their very wise men, he told me that many of the things done by the fakirs of India, which seem so strange and mysterious to the people of the West, were produced by breath action and thought concentration. Furthermore, the Upanishads lay more stress upon the breath than upon anything else. And in their summing up of God, the very last phrase used is, which is the breath of life. Our own scriptures, both the Old and New Testaments, have reference after reference to the breath as the Lord God made man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. The controlled breath is always the external evidence of the controlled mind, the result of the true interaction from center to circumference. But even in the effort which apparently makes only for physical control, one takes a step in the right direction, calling into use as he does mental faculties which in turn aid in the physical development, helping to produce a fit habitation for an immortal soul. End of chapter 4. Stay right here in this video as I will move on to the next chapter. Before we do that, hit that like button. Let me know you were here. Leave me a comment. What are your thoughts on breathing? And what are your thoughts about taking in energy through the breath? Let me know. Let's flip the page to chapter 5. Dependence and Independence. A quote by Emerson. Thou must be true thyself, if thou the truth wouldst teach. Thy soul must overflow if thou another soul would reach. It needs the overflow of heart to give the lips full speech. Think truly, and thy thoughts shall the world's famine feed. Speak truly, and each word of thine shall be a fruitful seed. Live truly, and thy life shall be a great and noble creed. End quote. Another quote by Emerson. Eat thou the bread which men refuse, flee from the goods that flee from thee. Seek nothing, fortune seeketh thee. End quote. It will usually be found that somewhere between two extremes, or even two contradictions, will lie the simple truth. Take, for instance, some of the truths. the two seemingly opposing sides of which have now and again rent Christendom. Some great souls have believed God determined from all eternity whatsoever should come to pass, down to the minutest detail. They left no room for the slightest exercise of choice or free will. Man was reduced to the place of a puppet. To other great souls, this seemed a monstrous belief, and they thought and fought and died for the truth that man was a free agent and could do with his life what he willed. It was argued that both could not be right, and so those who saw the reasonableness of one point of view spent an immense amount of time and energy trying to convince or refute the adherents of the other, and little was ever accomplished by it. But that is just the kernel of the whole matter. Fundamentally, both are right. That is, everything is determined by eternal law to the extent that every step of the soul's unfoldment is written indelibly in the constitution of all things. The great truth of the freedom of man's will comes in at the parting of the ways of life and death. Both lead to the same ultimate goal, but there is a world of difference for those who choose. Man is perfectly free to choose for himself a life, many lifetimes indeed, of sorrow and suffering, or to place himself in harmony with the great current of universal being, and so fulfill the law of life, and know the truth that shall make him free. In this way, he himself becomes a part of the great freedom of all life. Again, in the instance of the Unitarian and the Trinitarian, these are but two sides of a single truth. There is but one central source of all life, and yet we read that God said, "Let us make man in our own image, and male and female created he them." From the earliest days, the Trinity of the Mother, Father, and Child have been the symbol of creative power. 6,000 years before Christ, when Egyptian civilization was at its height, this was the recognized symbol of the thinking world. And yet it was not until considerably after the Christian era that the symbol was confused with the truth symbolized. Both are true. The truth is too great for any symbol to hold in its entirety. So many false beliefs cluster about a symboled truth. It becomes overgrown and almost lost sight of. So we should accustom ourselves to take a broad and comprehensive view of each thing that life presents to us. Take an all-around view and try to see all that is to be seen. It is when we see but partially that we are unjust and want to coerce others. There is nothing separately and absolutely true. All is relative, all dependent in a way. Now let us first talk of dependence in its broadest sense. It is not the positive side of the one great truth, but there is much in it that repays consideration. It is true that extremes meet. Consider the effect of extreme heat and extreme cold. They are practically the same. Both cause disintegration of matter. The study of dependence is, in a sense, the study of independence also. We are all dependent, to some extent, not only upon environment, but upon everyone with whom we come in touch. It is not possible for two people to meet and talk for 5 minutes without each influencing the life of the other. Sometimes the mutual gain or injury is apparent. Sometimes it does not appear on the surface at all, or not until years afterward. Sometimes one seems to do all the giving, and the other to receive only. But this is only seeming. Anything that does not belong to us cannot stay with us, and what is really ours, no one can take from us. This law is applicable to everything: material possessions, friendships, love. We enter into a possession of many things that are not ours. This possession is only seeming, and the law is never transgressed, either by him who gives or him who receives. Now, what does dependence mean? What does living on others mean. Take the example of a tree and a parasitic vine. At first, both seem to be doing very well, but by and by the vitality of even the largest and strongest tree is sapped, and not only does it die, but the parasite also dies in consequence. In depending unduly on another, one, sooner or later, destroys his own life. So those who would give no equivalent for what they receive really hurt and deprive themselves. It is not the amount we give. This has nothing to do with the matter. It is the motive that prompts the giving. We may be able to do or to be or to give very little that is tangible or even recognizable. But if our motives, our earnest endeavor and intention is to do our best, then the great law of poise and balance and compensation will see to it that there is no lack. We can give of ourselves, of goodwill from the heart, and no matter what form this may take, it is perhaps the highest gift of all. Once, while I was traveling in the South, a friend called my attention to a fig tree and asked me if I noticed anything peculiar about the bark. I looked closely and saw something that seemed to be a little scab. Under a magnifying glass, it was seen to be a tiny parasite, and on closer examination, I saw a still smaller parasite feeding, living on this other. Many people live just in this way, on the vitality of others. Now, this is just as dishonest as if they picked the other's pocket or stole his bread. Dependents on this character are only making similar conditions for themselves, for like always begets like. This course has nothing to do with the true interdependence, the relationship of one to another throughout the great human family that proves us members of one another. It is not essential that the giving and receiving should be invariably between the same people, that is, that we should always see to it that we give in exact proportion to exactly the people from whom we believe we have received a benefit. This is not always possible, nor even desirable. We may have received a benefit from someone to whom nothing we have to give would be of any service. Leave personality out of the question. From every man according to his ability, to every man according to his needs. Let us give of our best, of our very selves, constantly, ungrudgingly, wherever there's a need, and we may then be very sure that no more will come to us than is ours by right. If every man were given, not bread, but a chance to work, it would transform the face of the earth and bring about the true dependence, which is the coming of the kingdom of God. But one may say, what influence have I upon economic conditions? What responsibility have I in bringing this about? We each have this responsibility, to inform ourselves fully and fearlessly of the facts and hold resolutely the right mental attitude toward the problem. We may not be able apparently to change outward conditions, but by and by, if the mind of each, and so of the majority, is on the right side, we will find that wondrous force we call public sentiment doing what each of us would have done if only he had been able. This is a greater force than any law on any statute book. In the matter of sympathy and goodwill, there's often just the same abuse of the great law of giving and receiving. We offer a model in pity that degrades the receiver and weakens the giver. In this way, we put ourselves on the plane with the weakest and so make it impossible to be of any real service to him. We can never help a man to be better and stronger by talking and condoling with him as to his weaknesses. We can never call out the good in another by dwelling on the evil. Think of him as good, and this makes it the easier for him to realize your thought of him. Wherever there is the true giving, there is no need to consider the matter of receiving. It takes care of itself. Only this, when things come, whether material or immaterial, do not let the spirit of pride prevent the benefit that comes from generous giving. You hear someone say, "But I don't want to be dependent. I love to give, but I don't like to be under obligations." Now, this is all wrong. Give others an opportunity to feel the joy of giving. We are not keeping the law and poise in balance if we want to do all the giving. It is as bad as the other extreme of withholding when another needs. We often give most truly by receiving, and we keep only as we give freely away. He that loseth his life shall find it. There are many phases of independence. Some people think that brutal frankness is independence. They believe that speaking out whatever is in their minds or anything that is true without any other consideration proves them independent. Now, any inconsiderateness or unkindness cannot fail to hurt another, and whatever hurts another must hurt ourselves as well. It is impossible to affect another for either good or evil without ourselves being influenced in the same way and to the same extent. We do not need to tell unkind things of another, even if they are facts, in order to prove our own truthfulness. We do not need to say that we are truthful. Our lives will stand for that. A true independence would be as kind as it is strong. No matter what the words spoken, the motive prompting them would somehow find expression. If one has the good of a person at heart, this will make itself felt, and the word spoken in gentleness leaves the deepest impress. Then, as to that class of actions called independent, often when one person justly or unjustly feels he has cause to dislike another, he will scorn any overture from that other. He may forgive him, but he will not want to accept any favor from him. Now just stop and think what this means. He is standing in the way of that individual's doing something that would make his life better. He feels he has hurt the other and wants to do something to show his change of attitude and to make reparation. The person injured spurns that effort and thereby hinders his own growth and development as well as that of the other. Now, this is not independence, but short-sighted obstinacy, pride, and arrogance. True independence, as I understand it, is this: the knowledge that in life all acts react, none can separate himself, but all contribute, each to the other's good, and all to the good of the whole. The true independence is where each would scorn to do less than his best, to give less than his real self, and so the best and the truest comes back to each. This does not mean that all relationship with one's fellows are on a level, that there are no close, warm personal ties of sympathy and friendship. Even with near friends, there are degrees of friendship. We can love all, and yet love some more than others. John, because he had unfolded more to the love principle, could best understand Jesus, and so came into closest companionship with him. I can conceive of nothing so much to be desired in this world, or any other, as that we love all our fellow men. Not that we love our friends only, or those that love us, but that, without exception and without effort, we love all. There will always be some that are closest, but if we live from the center, if we live out our true, our deepest selves, there is no reason why the spirit of love should not bring us in touch with all. It is not the love that comes to us, but that which we give out that really enriches our lives. If I could love everybody and everything in this world, it would seem to me I had achieved the grandest, the highest, and most wonderful thing of all life. If this is true, then, is not the life of true independence the life of service, of benefit to others, of answering to their needs? Give to him that asketh of thee, and of him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. Let the demand come from wherever it will, it does not matter. From relatives or from strangers, it should be all the same with us in our giving. Wherever there is a genuine need, there we should give. This is the plan of life. Only as we give out will more come into our lives. You know, when you exhale the breath thoroughly, the air rushes back into the lungs again without stint. The effort is in the exhaling. There's none required in the inhaling. So in our lives, we must put forth the effort in our actions, in the outgoing, and the return will be without fail. This illustrates the truth that God is more willing to give than we are to receive. This does not mean a personal God, who is at times benign and gracious, and at times indifferent or implacable, but the law of love, which is the underlying power of the universe. In the true interdependence, there lies the life of perfect freedom. There is nothing contradictory in dependence and independence. In the balance of both lies the truth, and those who poise their lives between the two extremes are giving real service to the world. End of chapter 5. Please do hit that like button. Let's move on to the next video as we continue on to chapter 6. And if you like what you hear and what you see, please do subscribe